The wind was howling through Eagle's Peak that October night. The last thing I remember seeing was Elena's face. It's not filled with terror as you'd expect from a woman watching her husband plummet into darkness, but something else entirely. Relief. As I fell through 300 feet of mountain air, one thought crystallized in my mind. She had planned this. My own wife, 6 months pregnant with what I thought was our child, had just murdered me for money I didn't even know existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But death wasn't the end for me. It was just the beginning of her eternal nightmare. The morning it all started, Elena was humming in our kitchen, her hand resting on her growing belly as she made coffee. 6 months along, she'd developed this glow that everyone always talked about pregnant women having. I thought it was happiness about our future together. I was working double shifts at the construction site in Ridgemont, trying to save every penny for the baby's arrival. We'd been married 3 years, and this pregnancy felt like the missing piece that would complete our little family. "Marcus, honey," she called from the kitchen, her voice sweet as always. "Can you grab the mail? I'm expecting something from the insurance company." I should have paid attention to that detail. Should have asked questions. But I was too busy being the devoted husband, too caught up in the excitement of becoming a father. I grabbed the mail without a second thought, handing over the thick envelope addressed to Elena Martinez Stone. She tore it open with an eagerness that seemed excessive for insurance paperwork, but I dismissed it as nesting instincts. Elena worked at Lakewood General Hospital as a night shift nurse, which meant our schedules barely overlapped. I'd leave for the construction site at dawn, and she'd head to work around sunset. We'd gotten used to communicating through little notes left on the refrigerator and stolen conversations over morning coffee. It should have bothered me more that we rarely saw each other, but I chalked it up to temporary sacrifices for our growing family. Ryan, my best friend since childhood, had been working the same construction crew as me for 5 years. He was the brother I never had. His wife Sarah had become Elena's closest friend when we all moved to Ridgemont together. The 4 of us used to spend every weekend at our cabin up in the mountains, playing cards, grilling steaks, and talking about our dreams. Ryan and Sarah were trying for their first baby, and Elena would spend hours giving Sarah advice about pregnancy and motherhood. "You seem different lately, man," Ryan mentioned one Thursday afternoon as we finished installing windows on the new municipal building. "Everything okay at home?" I wiped sweat from my forehead, considering his question. Elena had been distant for weeks, but I attributed it to pregnancy hormones and the stress of her job. Oh, just the usual stuff. Elena's been tired a lot, and work's been crazy for both of us. Ryan nodded, but something flickered across his face. Sarah mentioned, "Elena's been working a lot of overtime lately. Like every night this month." That caught my attention. Elena had told me she was cutting back her hours because of the pregnancy. The hospital administrator had supposedly recommended lighter duties and shorter shifts. I'd been proud of her for prioritizing our baby's health, even if it meant tighter finances. "Must be short-staffed," I said, but doubt was already creeping in. That evening, I decided to surprise Elena at work with dinner from her favorite Chinese restaurant. Night receptionist at Lakewood General looked confused when I asked for Elena Martinez Stone. "I'm sorry, sir, but Elena called in sick tonight. She's been calling in sick quite a bit lately." "Is everything okay with the pregnancy?" My blood turned cold. Elena had left the house at her usual time, dressed in scrubs, complaining about a difficult patient assignment. Where had she been going every night for the past month? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe she'd been going to doctor appointments she hadn't told me about. Maybe there were complications with the pregnancy she was trying to handle alone. Maybe she was planning some kind of surprise and needed the extra time away from home. Elena came home that night at her usual time. She launched into a detailed story about a particularly challenging shift in the cardiac unit. She described specific patients, difficult procedures, and interactions with doctors. Either she was an incredible liar, or something much more complex was happening. "How's your day, babe?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me with her hand on her belly. "Good, finished the windows on the municipal project?" Ryan and I were talking about taking a weekend trip up to the cabin soon. Just the 4 of us, like old times. Elena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. I don't think Sarah can make it. She mentioned something about visiting her mother. This was news to me. Sarah's mother lived in Florida, and she'd just visited 2 months ago. But I didn't push the issue. Elena knew Sarah's schedule better than I did. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I called Sarah during my lunch break, ostensibly to confirm weekend plans. Oh, Marcus, I wish we could come to the cabin. But Elena said you and she needed some alone time before the baby arrives. She specifically asked us not to join you guys this weekend. The pieces weren't fitting together. Elena had told me Sarah couldn't come because of family obligations. Sarah thought Elena wanted private time with me. Someone was manipulating the situation, and I was starting to suspect my wife was the common denominator. That weekend, Elena suggested we head up to the cabin alone. Just us and the baby, she said, patting her stomach. We should enjoy these quiet moments before everything changes. The drive up to Pinewood Cabin usually took an hour through winding mountain roads. Elena was unusually quiet, staring out the passenger window at the autumn foliage. October in the mountains was spectacular, with golden aspens and deep red maples creating a tapestry of color against the evergreen backdrop. But something felt off about this trip. I've been thinking about names, Elena said suddenly. For the baby? Yeah. What did you have in mind, Dylan? If it's a boy. The name hit me strangely. We'd never discussed Dylan as an option before. It wasn't a family name for either of us, and it didn't appear on any of the lists we'd made together. Where did Dylan come from, I asked. Elena shrugged. I just like how it sounds. Strong, but gentle. I filed that detail away with all the other inconsistencies I'd been noticing. At the cabin, Elena seemed restless. She kept checking her phone, which was unusual since cell service was spotty in the mountains. She also insisted we take a walk along the ridge trail, something she'd avoided since becoming pregnant because of the steep drops and rocky terrain. Are you sure you want to hike? The doctor said to avoid strenuous activity. It's not strenuous, just a gentle walk. I need the fresh air. The ridge trail at Eagles Peak was spectacular but dangerous, especially as evening approached. The path ran along a sheer cliff face with a 300-foot drop to the valley below. In daylight with good weather, it was manageable. But storm. Clouds were gathering, and the wind was picking up. Maybe we should head back, I suggested as the first drops of rain began to fall. Just a little further, Elena insisted. There's something I want to show you. We reached the highest point of the trail, just as the storm hit in earnest. Rain lashed across the exposed ridge, making the rocks slippery and treacherous. Elena stopped at the very edge of the cliff, her hair whipping in the wind. Elena, we need to get back to the cabin. This is dangerous. She turned to face me. And for the first time in months, her expression was completely honest. There was no warmth, no love, no concern for our safety. There was calculation, determination, and something that looked almost like hatred. Marcus, she said, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. I need you to know something. The baby isn't yours? The words hit me harder than the storm. What? Dylan's baby? Not yours? We've been together for 8 months, Dylan. The name she'd suggested for our child was actually the father's name. Everything clicked into place. The late nights, the lies about work, the distance between us, the insurance paperwork, the isolated weekend trip. Elena, what are you saying? I'm saying I need you gone, Marcus. Permanently. She stepped toward me, and I instinctively stepped backward. My foot hit loose gravel, and I felt myself losing balance on the rain-slicked rock. Elena's hand shot out, but instead of steadying me, she pushed. The sensation of falling is impossible to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. Time stretches and compresses simultaneously. I had enough time to understand that my wife had just murdered me, but not enough time to process the betrayal fully. I saw her face above me, growing smaller as I plummeted through the darkness, and that expression of relief was burned into my consciousness. 300 feet later, my body struck the jagged rocks at the bottom of Eagles Peak. Everything went black, and Marcus Stone, devoted husband and expectant father, died on impact. But that wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of my old life. Death wasn't darkness. It was drowning in light so intense it felt like liquid fire pouring through every atom of my being. I found myself standing in what looked like an endless marble corridor, my body whole and unmarked, despite the crushing impact that had ended my life. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange weightlessness that made me question whether I was truly dead or simply dreaming. "Marcus Stone," a voice called from behind me. I turned to see a woman approaching, her presence both commanding and somehow familiar. She appeared to be in her 30s, with silver hair that seemed to move independently of any wind, and eyes that held depths I couldn't fathom. "My name is Victoria. I've been waiting for you. Am I dead?" The question felt absurd. Even as I asked it, "Your physical form ceased functioning, yes. But death is more complicated than most people understand, especially when it involves betrayal of the deepest kind." Victoria gestured to the corridor around us. "Welcome to the threshold, Marcus. This is where souls come when they're earthly. Business remains unfinished." The threshold stretched infinitely in both directions, its walls lined with doors that hummed with different energies. Some radiated warmth and peace, others pulsed with darker vibrations that made my skin crawl. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria noticed my attention drifting to the doors. Each door leads to a different realm of existence. Most souls pass through quickly, moving on to whatever comes next. But some, like you, have been wronged so profoundly that the universe itself demands balance. Balance. Elena's betrayal wasn't just personal, Marcus. She violated fundamental laws that govern the bonds between souls. Murder motivated by greed and lust creates ripples that corrupt the natural order. The mountain spirits of eagles. Peak have been watching your family for generations, and they're not pleased with what happened on their sacred ground. As Victoria spoke, images began flashing through my mind, but they weren't memories from my own life. I saw Elena with Dylan, their affair stretching back nearly a year. I watched her research life insurance policies, calculating the exact amount needed to start a new life with her lover. I witnessed conversations where they planned my death, debating methods that would look accidental. The pregnancy had been her cover, a way to appear vulnerable and grieving when I disappeared. She increased her life insurance policy to $2 million 3 weeks before the cabin trip. Victoria continued, seemingly reading my thoughts. Dylan works at the insurance company where she filed the paperwork. They've been planning this for months. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain of falling. Elena hadn't just killed me in a moment of passion or desperation. She'd calculated my worth, literally, and decided I was more valuable dead than alive. Every loving gesture over the past year had been performance. Every tender moment a lie, designed to keep me compliant until she could execute her plan. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That depends on what you choose." Some souls seek immediate justice, demanding their killers face consequences in the mortal realm. Others choose to move on, accepting that earthly justice is beyond their control. But you, Marcus, have a third option. Victoria led me to a specific door, this one carved from what looked like volcanic glass. The surface reflected not my current appearance, but images of the life I'd lost. Elena laughing at my jokes during our honeymoon. The moment she told me she was pregnant, tears of joy streaming down her face. All of it fabricated, all of it poison disguised as love. The mountain spirits have offered you rebirth, not just a return to life, but a transformation that will give you the power to ensure true justice. Elena and Dylan won't face earthly consequences for your murder. She'll collect the insurance money, claim you fell accidentally during a romantic weekend getaway, and play the grieving widow perfectly. The local sheriff is Dylan's cousin, and he'll ensure the investigation finds nothing suspicious. Corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. They hadn't just planned my murder. They'd engineered a cover-up that would protect them from any legal consequences. Elena would be free to raise Dylan's child with my insurance money while the world remembered me as a tragic accident victim. What does rebirth mean? I asked. Your soul will return to your body, but changed, enhanced. The mountain spirits will grant you abilities that will help you expose the truth and ensure Elena faces consequences for her actions. But there's a price. What price? Victorious expression grew solemn. Elena's punishment won't be earthly imprisonment or financial ruin. The spirits demand perfect justice, which means she must experience exactly what she put you through, but eternally. Images flashed before me of Elena falling through endless darkness, experiencing the terror and betrayal I'd felt in my final moments, but without the mercy of death to end her suffering. She would fall forever, understanding with perfect clarity that her greed and cruelty had condemned her to perpetual nightmare. Dylan, too? Dylan will face his own justice, but different from Elena's. He was complicit, but not the primary architect. Elena planned your death before she even approached him with the idea. His punishment will be watching Elena's eternal fall, knowing he helped create it, but being powerless to help her. The offer was tempting, but the weight of it pressed down on me like the mountain itself. Condemning someone to eternal suffering, even someone who'd murdered me, felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. What if I just choose to move on, accept death, and let earthly justice take its course? Then Elena and Dylan will succeed completely. She collect $2 million, claim your death was accidental, and live comfortably with your money while raising another man's child. The insurance company won't investigate thoroughly because Dylan will suppress any red flags. Your friends and family will mourn you as a victim of bad weather and poor timing. The injustice of it burned through me. Elena would not only escape consequences but profit enormously from murdering me. She'd probably play the tragic widow, accepting condolences and sympathy while secretly celebrating her financial windfall with her lover. Show me what happened after I fell, I said. Victoria waved her hand, and the volcanic glass door became a window into the mortal realm. I watched Elena scramble down the treacherous mountainside to where my broken body lay among the rocks. But instead of grief or panic, she methodically checked my pulse, confirmed I was dead, then climbed back up to the trail. She spent several minutes disheveling her appearance, working up tears, and practicing her story before hiking back to the cabin. At the cabin, she called 911. Delivering a performance worthy of an Oscar, her voice broke perfectly as she described. Our romantic evening walk interrupted by sudden weather. She sobbed convincingly while explaining how I'd slipped on wet rocks despite her warnings about the danger. The dispatcher comforted her while coordinating rescue efforts. Dylan arrived at the cabin before the emergency responders, ostensibly. As a concerned friend who'd heard the radio chatter through his connections, he held Elena while she cried, and to anyone watching, he looked like a good friend supporting a traumatized widow. But in the moments when they thought no one was looking, I saw the satisfied glances they exchanged. Their plan had worked perfectly. The next several hours showed Elena's masterful manipulation of everyone around her. She called my parents, Ryan and Sarah, and my coworkers, delivering the tragic news with exactly the right balance of grief and shock. Ryan broke down completely when she told him, and Sarah immediately drove up to the mountains to comfort her. Friend, watching Sarah hold Elena while she cried fake tears over my death made my non-existent stomach churn. Elena's already pregnant with Dylan's child, Victoria said quietly. She's been telling everyone the stress of your death triggered early labor concerns, but she's actually right on schedule for a baby conceived with Dylan 11 months ago. 11 months. But she only told me she was pregnant 6 months ago. She hid the pregnancy for 5 months while she finalized plans for your death. Timing had to be perfect so she could claim the baby was yours, born prematurely. To the trauma of losing you. Dylan's been researching premature birth statistics to ensure their story holds up to medical scrutiny. The level of calculation was breathtaking. Elena hadn't just decided to kill me. She'd orchestrated an elaborate deception that would let her profit from my death. While raising Dylan's child with my family's acceptance and support, she'd stolen my life, my money, my family's love, and even corrupted my memory by associating it with a child that wasn't mine. I want the rebirth, I said, my decision crystallizing like ice. I want justice. Dart. Victoria nodded, though her expression remained grave. Once you choose this path, there's no turning back. Elena's eternal. Punishment will be tied to your existence. As long as your reborn soul exists in any realm, she will continue falling. Are you prepared for that responsibility? She murdered me for money? She would have let my parents believe their son died in a tragic accident while she raised another? Man's child on my insurance money. She deserves whatever consequences come from her choices. Very well, but understand, Marcus, that justice of this magnitude changes you. You won't return as the same trusting man who loved Elena despite her deceptions. The mountain spirits will give you the power to see through lies, to understand people's true motivations, and to compel truth from those who would deceive you. You'll become something between human and spirit, forever changed by your experience. With ultimate betrayal, the transformation began before I could respond. Pain more intense than my death consumed every particle of my being as the mountain spirits poured their ancient power into my soul. I felt my essence expanding, strengthening, developing new capabilities that no ordinary human possessed. Consciousness touched the earth itself, connecting with forces that had existed since the mountains first rose from primordial stone. When the pain finally subsided, I found myself back in my broken body at the base of Eagle's Peak, but I was no longer the same Marcus Stone who had fallen to his death. I was something new, something powerful, and something very, very angry. Above me, storm clouds gathered with unnatural intensity, and I could feel Elena's terror beginning as the universe itself started collecting its debt. My eyes opened too. Moonlight filtering through pine branches, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming. My body lay exactly where it had landed after the fall. But instead of broken bones and torn flesh, I felt stronger than I'd ever been in life. The mountain spirit's power coursed through my veins like liquid starlight, and I could sense every living thing within miles of Eagle's Peak. Most importantly, I could feel Elena's presence at the cabin above. Her heartbeat quickened by guilt she was desperately trying to suppress. I stood slowly, testing limbs that should have been shattered. My clothes were torn from the fall, but my skin showed no marks from the jagged rocks that had ended my mortal existence. When I looked down at my hands, they seemed to shimmer slightly. In the darkness, as if lit from within, the transformation had left me something between human and elemental force, connected to the ancient power that had shaped these mountains over millennia. The hike back up to the cabin should have taken hours, but I found myself moving with supernatural speed and silence. My feet barely touched the ground, and the treacherous trail that had claimed my life now felt as comfortable as walking across level ground. Animals moved aside as I passed, sensing something beyond their understanding but not threatening to the natural world. I was death-walking, but only for those who had earned it. Through the cabin windows, I watched Elena pacing. Back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. She was speaking to Dylan, her voice carrying clearly to my enhanced senses, despite the closed windows and distance. "The body's gone missing," she hissed into the phone. "The search and rescue team found blood on the rocks, torn clothing, everything. That proves he fell, but no body." Dylan's voice came through the speaker, tinny but audible to my new abilities. "Animal predators? Maybe. Mountain lions or bears could have dragged it away in one night. A full-grown man's body completely vanished." Elena's panic was rising, though she was trying to maintain composure. "The sheriff is asking questions I don't have answers for. Stick to the story." He went for a romantic walk. A sudden storm, he slipped and fell while trying to get to safety. "You were too shocked and scared to attempt a rescue in the dark. It's tragic but believable." Elena stopped pacing and stared out the window toward the ridge where she'd murdered me. For a moment, her reflection caught the moonlight, and I saw something that chilled me more than my own death. She wasn't just unremorseful about killing me. She was annoyed that my disappearing body was complicating her plans. Somehow, what if he's out there injured but alive? Dylan's laughter crackled through the phone. "Elena, you saw him fall 300 feet onto solid rock. Nobody survives that. His body probably got washed away by storm runoff. Mountain. Streams are powerful after heavy rain. Then why do I feel like someone's watching me?" I smiled grimly at that. The connection between us hadn't been severed by death. It had been transformed into something she couldn't escape. Part of the mountain spirit's gift was ensuring that Elena would always sense my presence, a constant reminder of her guilt that would grow stronger with each passing day. Over the next week, I remained hidden in the deep wilderness around Eagles Peak, learning to control my new abilities while watching Elena's performance unfold. She played the grieving widow flawlessly, accepting condolences from friends and family while secretly coordinating with Dylan to handle the insurance claim. My parents drove up from Colorado, devastated by the loss of their only son, and Elena comforted them with tears that appeared genuine to everyone except me. Ryan and Sarah were completely fooled by her act. They took shifts staying with Elena, ensuring she wasn't alone during such a traumatic time. Watching Sarah hold Elena while she sobbed about losing the love of her life made my supernatural blood boil. Sarah was genuinely mourning me while comforting my murderer, not knowing that Elena was already planning how to spend the insurance money with her lover. The insurance investigator arrived on the fourth day, a middle-aged woman named Detective Lisa Morrison, who specialized in accidental death claims. Elena had prepared for this encounter carefully, but she hadn't prepared for my new ability to influence electronic devices and communication systems. "Mrs. Stone, I need to ask you some difficult questions about the night your husband died." Detective Morrison began, settling into the cabin's living room with her recording equipment. "Of course, I want to help however I can," Elena's voice carried just the right note of brave determination mixed with lingering grief. "Walk me through the evening again, starting from when you decided to take the hike." Elena launched into her rehearsed story, describing our romantic dinner, the spontaneous decision to watch the sunset from the ridge, and the sudden storm that turned tragic. But as she spoke, I began subtly interfering with her phone, causing it to display text messages and call logs that told a very different story. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Stone, but your phone seems to be malfunctioning," Detective Morrison said, pointing to the device that was now scrolling through Elena's message history with Dylan. "It's displaying some concerning conversations." Elena grabbed for the phone, but it was too late. Messages about insurance policies, discussions of my death, and romantic exchanges with Dylan were clearly visible on the screen. Her carefully constructed facade began cracking as she struggled to explain away communications that revealed her motive and planning. "These messages seem to indicate you were involved with someone named Dylan, and that you discussed your husband's life insurance policy extensively before his death." "Those are fake," Elena stammered. "Someone must have hacked my phone, but I wasn't finished." Using my connection to the mountain's ancient power, I began influencing the cabin itself. Doors opened and closed on their own. Lights flickered in patterns that spelled out accusatory words, and the temperature dropped so dramatically that both women could see their breath. Elena's composed mask finally shattered completely, as supernatural phenomena made it impossible to maintain her act. "What's happening?" Detective Morrison asked, her professional skepticism warring with obvious unease at the unexplainable events around her. "I don't know," Elena whispered, but her eyes were darting around the room as if searching for something she could sense but not see. I materialized slowly in the corner of the room, allowing my form to become visible gradually so they could process what they were seeing. Elena's scream pierced the mountain air as she saw her murdered husband standing whole and unmarked, power radiating from every inch of his transformed being. "Hello, Elena," I said, my voice carrying harmonics that made the windows vibrate. "We need to talk." Detective Morrison was reaching for her weapon, but I raised a hand that froze her in place without harming her. She could observe and record, but she wouldn't interfere with the justice that needed to unfold. Elena backed against the wall, her pregnant belly prominent as she pressed herself away from me. "You're dead. I saw you fall. You died." "Did die. You murdered me for insurance money so you could run away with Dylan and raise his child. But the mountain spirits don't appreciate murder on their sacred ground, especially murder motivated by greed and adultery." "I don't know what you're talking about," Elena tried weakly, but her denials carried no conviction. She could see that I knew everything, that death had granted me knowledge of all her deceptions. "Dylan Carver, your lover for the past 11 months. The pregnancy you hid for 5 months while planning my death. The $2 million insurance policy you took out 3 weeks before our cabin trip. The coordination with Dylan's cousin, Sheriff Martinez, to ensure the investigation would find nothing suspicious." Each revelation hit Elena like a physical blow, I could see her realizing that her carefully constructed plan was unraveling. Completely. Detective Morrison was recording everything. Her equipment somehow still functioning despite the supernatural energy filling the cabin. Elena's confession would be documented, even if the legal system struggled to process the circumstances. Of how it was obtained? The baby, Elena said suddenly, as if remembering she could use the pregnancy to gain sympathy. Whatever you think happened, I'm carrying your child. Dylan's child, I corrected. Conceived 11 months ago, not 6. You've been lying about the timeline to make everyone believe it was mine. Lena's face went white as she realized. Even her final deception had been exposed. The mountain spirit's gift had shown me the truth of the child's parentage. Elena's plan to use my family's love for their supposed grandchild as emotional manipulation crumbled to nothing. What do you want? She whispered. Justice, I replied. Real justice, not the corrupted mockery you and Dylan arranged with his cousin. The cabin began to shake as my power interacted with Elena's terror. Outside, storm clouds gathered with unnatural speed. The temperature continued dropping until frost began forming on the windows despite the October warmth. Elena was about to discover that some betrayals carry consequences that extend far beyond the mortal realm. The ground beneath the cabin began to crack as Elena's terror reached its peak, and I could feel the mountain spirits stirring in response. Detective Morrison's recording equipment captured every word as Elena's composure finally shattered completely under the weight of supernatural judgment. Please, Elena sobbed, clutching her stomach. Whatever you think I did, I'm pregnant. I'm carrying a baby. Dylan's baby, I repeated, my voice resonating with power that made the cabin's foundation tremble. Stop using pregnancy as a shield for murder. The mountain spirits can sense the truth of bloodlines, Elena. That child shares none of my essence. Detective Morrison stepped forward, her professional training overriding her fear of the impossible situation unfolding before her. Mrs. Stone, based on what I've witnessed here and the evidence on your phone, I need to inform you that you're under investigation for insurance fraud and suspected murder. Elena's eyes darted between us, calculating desperately for some escape route. But I could read her thoughts now, see the web of lies she was constructing, even as she spoke. The mountain spirit's gift had stripped away all her ability to deceive me. You can't prove anything, she said, her voice gaining strength as she fell back on legal technicalities. There's no body, no physical evidence of murder. Everything you're seeing is supernatural nonsense that won't hold up in any court. She was right about earthly courts, but she'd forgotten that justice existed beyond human law. As the cruiser pulled away with Dylan and Elena in the back seat, both cuffed and hollow-eyed, Martinez stayed behind at the cabin, ostensibly to gather statements, but in truth he didn't want to drive alone through the mountain roads with what he'd just seen weighing on his conscience. Inside, silence fell like a shroud over the cabin. Detective Morrison stood near the hearth, reviewing her audio files with shaking hands. I don't know what to write in my report, she murmured. This goes so far beyond anything I've ever dealt with. You won't have to explain it all, I said. Just the evidence. The rest isn't for police reports. For the mountain. She looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I turned toward the window, where moonlight had broken through the clouds, illuminating the frosted trees with an eerie glow. In that light, the frost markings on the glass shimmered with residual energies, still spelling out Elena's sins in jagged crystalline letters. But new ones were forming now. Blood debt. Morrison stepped closer, her breath catching. What? Is that the spirits don't care about trials or plea deals, I said. They care about balance? What was stolen must be restored, and then the wind shifted. It was no longer just the icy breath of a storm, it carried whispers. A chorus of voices too ancient for language, weaving through the cracks in the walls, the slats in the floorboards, the marrow in our bones. Morrison backed away, wide-eyed. Is this them? I nodded. They've accepted Elena and Dylan's mortal punishment, but their spiritual debt still lingers. From the center of the room, frost began to bloom on the wooden floor, swirling outward like ink in water. The symbols were older than any alphabet, each one pulsing faintly with light. A moment later, a shape stepped through the doorway, not from the outside, but from the very fabric of reality. It was not human, not spirit, something in between. Tall, with skin like petrified bark and eyes that flickered like embers, the figure radiated a presence that bent the air around it. Moss clung to its shoulders. Antlers arched from its head like a crown carved from bone, the warden of the mountain. Morrison fell to her knees. "What is that? A watcher? A keeper of balance?" I said, unable to stop my own voice from trembling. "It's here to collect the debt." The warden extended one long-fingered hand, and from the frost-marked glass, a wisp of smoke curled out Elena's betrayal, distilled into a spiritual essence. Another wisp followed Dylan's greed. Both hovered, suspended like fireflies in the warden's palm. Then it turned to me. "You were wronged," the voice echoed, not spoken aloud, but carried through thought and energy. The blood spilled. In treachery, cries for justice, but also for release. "Release?" I asked. "Vengeance burns clean," the warden replied, "but it leaves ashes. If you hold it too long, the fire will turn on you." I understood what it meant. I had been resurrected with a purpose, but that purpose was almost complete. I was never meant to stay. Morrison looked up, finally understanding. "You're not going back with us, are you?" I looked out at the trees, the mountain that had given me justice, the spirits that had guided my hand. Peace stirred in my chest, the first true peace I'd felt since the betrayal. "No," I said. "My time among the living ended at Eagle's Peak. The spirits gave me this chance, not for revenge, but for restoration." The warden extended its hand again, this time to me. "Come," it said. "The mountain remembers you. Let it carry your name into silence." I turned back to Morrison. "You'll know what to do with the evidence. Let the law handle what it can." She nodded, eyes wet but resolute. "I'll make sure they're held accountable. All the way." Then I stepped forward. The moment I touched the warden's hand, the frost vanished from the windows, the air warmed, and the whispers fell silent. I was home. Weeks later, the town of Willow Creek would whisper of that strange night, of how a once-dead man brought murderers to justice, then vanished without a trace. Some said it was a ghost, others a hoax. But those who knew the mountain, those who listened to its wind and watched its trees, knew the truth. Balance had been restored, and the mountain was watching. As the arrests were being made, I felt the mountain spirits stirring to life around Eagle's Peak. Ancient powers that had slumbered for centuries were awakening in response to the murder committed on their sacred ground. Elena and Dylan were about to discover that some crimes carry consequences that extend far beyond prison sentences. The real judgment was about to begin, and neither of them was prepared for what the spirits had planned. Lena would learn that. Betraying sacred trust on holy ground meant facing punishment that would last until the mountains themselves crumbled to dust. The handcuffs on Elena's wrists were only the beginning. As Detective Morrison led the arrests, and Sheriff Martinez read them their rights, I felt the mountain spirits rising from their ancient slumber. The very air around Eagle's Peak began to vibrate with otherworldly energy that made the trees bend away from the cabin and sent wildlife fleeing deeper into the wilderness. Elena looked back at me as they escorted her toward the police cruiser, and in that moment she saw something in my transformed eyes that made her stumble. The earthly justice system would handle their legal punishment, but the spiritual consequences of her betrayal were about to unfold according to laws far older than human civilization. "This isn't over," she called out, desperation making her voice crack. "Whatever you think you're doing, whatever this supernatural nonsense is, it won't hold up. I'll be out on bail tomorrow." I smiled, and the expression must have been terrifying, because Elena actually whimpered. "Your legal troubles are the least of your worries now." As the police vehicles disappeared down the mountain road, the true judgment began. The ground beneath my feet started to glow with an inner light, and I could feel the ancient spirits of Eagle's Peak manifesting around me.
Oh.
They appeared as translucent figures carved from mountain stone and starlight, their forms shifting between human and elemental shapes that hurt to look at directly. Victoria materialized beside me, her silver hair whipping in supernatural winds that touched nothing else in the natural world. The arrests satisfy human law, but the spirits require their own justice. Elena violated sacred ground with premeditated murder. That crime demands consequences beyond mortal punishment. She experiences exactly what she put you through, but eternally. The terror of falling, the betrayal of realizing someone she trusted planned her destruction. The helplessness of knowing death is approaching. But for Elena, there will be no merciful end. The air above the mountain began to tear like fabric, revealing a glimpse into dimensions that existed beyond normal reality. Through the rift, I could see Elena's future punishment unfolding. Would fall forever through endless darkness. Experiencing the same 300 feet of terror I had felt, but repeated infinitely. Each time she would remember why she was falling, relive the moment she chose greed over love, to understand with perfect clarity that her own choices had condemned her to this fate. And Dylan, he will watch her fall, knowing he helped create her punishment, but being powerless to help her. His greed enabled her murder, so his consequence is witnessing the results of that choice for eternity. 3 days later, Elena made bail exactly as she'd predicted. The insurance fraud charges were solid. Proving premeditated murder without a body was challenging, even with the recorded confession. She walked out of jail confident that expensive lawyers would minimize her sentence, perhaps reducing the charges to insurance fraud and getting her a few years in minimum security prison. She never made it home. The mountain spirits claimed Elena on the courthouse steps in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses. Security cameras captured her walking normally one moment, then suddenly screaming and clawing at empty air as if something invisible was dragging her away. She rose into the sky, her terrified shrieks echoing across the town as she disappeared into a dimensional rift that closed. Behind her, like a wound in reality, healing itself. Dylan lasted 2 more days before the spirits took him as well. Tried to flee Ridgemont, driving frantically toward the state border. But the mountain's justice couldn't be escaped by changing geography. His truck was found abandoned on a remote highway with Dylan nowhere to be seen. But those with supernatural sight could still perceive him, suspended in a void between dimensions, watching Elena's eternal fall and knowing he would witness it until the end of time itself. The legal system struggled to explain their disappearances, eventually classifying them as fugitives who had fled to avoid prosecution. Detective Morrison's investigation concluded that Marcus Stone had indeed been murdered by his wife and her lover, but the supernatural elements of his return were quietly omitted from official records. Some truths were too large for mortal institutions to process. I remained in the mountains for several weeks, adjusting to my transformed existence and learning the full extent of my new abilities. The spirits had granted me immortality, but it was tied to ensuring that justice prevailed for those who couldn't find it through normal means. I had become something like a supernatural guardian, empowered to help others who had been betrayed as completely as I had been. My parents and friends mourned my death, never knowing I had returned in altered form. It was better that way. They could remember Marcus Stone as he had been, rather than trying to understand what he had become. The insurance company paid out my policy to my parents instead of Elena, Detective Morrison, having proven the fraud conclusively before Elena's disappearance. 6 months after the judgment, I visited the courthouse where Elena had been taken. Standing on those steps, I could sense her eternal punishment continuing in dimensions beyond normal perception. She was still falling, still experiencing that moment of ultimate betrayal, still paying the price for choosing murder over divorce. Sometimes I wondered if the punishment was too severe, but then I would remember her face when she pushed me. The relief in her expression as I fell to what she thought was my death. The casual way she had planned to profit from murdering the man who had loved her unconditionally. Some betrayals were so fundamental that they required cosmic justice to balance the scales. Dylan's punishment was different, but equally permanent. He existed in a state between dimensions, able to perceive Elena's eternal fall, but powerless to help her. His greed had enabled her crime, and his consequence was watching its results play out infinitely. Every time Elena experienced the terror of falling, Dylan experienced the guilt of knowing he had helped put her there. The mountain spirits had shown perfect justice. Elena, who had betrayed love for money, now experienced eternal terror. Dylan, who had enabled murder for financial gain, now watched helplessly as his choices played out their consequences forever. Both of them faced punishment that matched their crimes exactly. As for me, I found peace in my transformed existence. The betrayal that had destroyed my mortal life had become the foundation of my immortal purpose. I traveled beyond Ridgemont, helping others who had been betrayed by those they trusted most. The mountain spirit's gift allowed me to see through deception, compel truth from liars, and ensure that justice found those who thought they had escaped consequences. Elena was still falling. Dylan was still watching. I was still ensuring that betrayal on this scale never went unpunished. The mountains had claimed their due, and justice had been served according to laws older than civilization itself. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. So just click and check them out.